Hey, hello there. My name is Liam Patton. I'm an immigration attorney at SOAR Immigration Legal Services. Today, I'm giving a presentation on how to fill out the forms that will be included in the Temporary Protected Status or TPS applications for our Ukrainian clients. So before we get into that, just a little bit of a background on SOAR. Since 1992, SOAR has been providing low-cost legal representation and education to refugees and immigrants in Oregon and Southwest Washington. We have two offices. One is in Portland, where I work, and another is in Hillsborough. And on the left, you can see some contact information and SOAR's website. So in order to make things easier and to see what these completed forms will look like, I made up a sample client. Not a stereotypical Ukrainian name, John Smith, but it'll do for now. So here's some quick facts I made up about John Smith. He's a Ukrainian citizen who came to the US at the border with Mexico on August 19th, 2022. He received a stamp in his passport that says DT. That basically means he was given humanitarian parole right there at the border. Although other types of things you might see are UHP, which is U for you, or maybe a visitor visa. So it can vary there. But John Smith, he previously acquired his work authorization and his Social Security information based on his humanitarian parole status. He came with his family, who would be filing separate applications, his wife, his son, and his daughter. At this point, let's pretend that the family has already completed their screening and their intake, and you have all of the documents that you'll need to complete their applications. So the first form we'll look at is I-821. This is the application for temporary protected status. This slide includes the locations of all the information you'll need to complete this form. So you'll need a passport, the I-94, a copy of the Social Security card if they have one, copy of the work authorization document if they have one, and then some of the pages from the intake or screening forms, or it may be on Edge that you can access. So that should have everything you need. So let's go through page by page and just talk about what each section is and some of the slightly more tricky parts of these applications, although they're all pretty straightforward. So part one of this application is just asking whether someone's applying for TPS for the first time or re-registering. Since the deadline to re-register has passed, we're probably only working with people who are applying for TPS for the first time. So we would check box 1A. We would also probably say yes for question 3A because normally we can apply for those work authorization documents connected to TPS at the same time. And then obviously the designated TPS country we would enter is Ukraine. Part two is just some basic information about the applicant. So here I put in John Smith's name. He doesn't have any other names, so we left that part blank. His mailing address, which is the same as his physical address. And then information like his A number, Social Security number, date of birth. We'll also enter in his gender, where he was born, and then in terms of countries of residence and countries of citizenships and countries of birth, it's probably just going to be all Ukraine for everybody you work with. And then the next part is asking about marital information. So in this example, John Smith is married, and he got married in 2009, so we entered that information. Next up, the application is asking about the manner of entry into the United States. So a lot of this information can be found on the I-94 and John Smith's passport. And then in terms of knowing the port of entry or the city or town, that might be on the intake form. And so we'll fill out, the passport number, the date it expires, things like that. And then up on the right-hand side of page 3, it's asking about current immigration status. So Most of the time, people who are applying for initial TPS still have the same status they had when they entered the United States. So for John Smith's case, that's humanitarian parole. It may be also U4U or UHP or a visitor visa, or if those things have expired, then you can put no status. And then most people you'll be working with are not in immigration proceedings. So we can check no for question 32 and then leave the next couple questions blank. And then that gets us to part 3, just a quick little section asking for biographic information, which should be included on one of the intake forms. And then part 4, I highlighted an important sentence that says complete this section only if you are filing a late initial application for TPS. Since we're on time, we don't need to fill out this section. So you'll see that all of part 4 and part 5 and part 6, which are also only need to be filled out if you're filing late, that's all blank. So we pick back up at part 7. This section is asking about eligibility standards for TPS. The first part of that is just clarification about when the client entered the United States. And then it's also going to be asking about other countries an applicant traveled through after leaving Ukraine, but prior to arriving in the United States, and whether any sort of status was offered to them there. Sometimes, especially if someone came through the U4U program, they may have only stopped over in one country for like a connecting flight or flew directly to the United States. If that's the case, you can enter all of that information in at questions 2, 3, and 4, 5. But in other cases, like in John Smith's case, his family traveled through a lot of countries in Europe before finally getting on a plane and coming to Mexico and then the United States. So in those cases, it's pretty much impossible to cram all of that information into part 7 here. So as you can see, the big red arrow is pointing to something you can do, which is just direct USCIS to look at part 11, which is the additional information section, where you have more room to input information about all those countries. But if you do that, either way, you should just make it clear on this page that no status was offered to the client in these other countries, if that's the case. The next part of this section is asking about criminal history or any history of human rights violations, things like that. So a lot of the time, there isn't anything, since clients have been screened already, there isn't anything to report here that would impact their admissibility or eligibility for TPS. However, as the box says at the top here, if you are not actually meeting with the client, it's okay to just leave this part blank and don't answer yes or no for any of them. We can leave that up to whatever attorney or accredited rep actually meets with the clients, because it's really important we get the truthful and accurate answer to all of these. But most of the time, people who have been screened don't have any criminal history to report that would lead to inadmissibility. They don't really seem to have plans to overthrow the United States government or anything like that. So most of the time, this will all be checked no anyway. But then you can start filling in part 8. Parts 8, 9, and 10 are just kind of contact information and signature pages for the applicant, the interpreter, and the attorney or accredited rep, respectively. So for the interpreter, I put in Snezhana's information. Snezhana is one of my coworkers at SOAR, who's also part of the Ukraine team. She does a lot of the interpreting and translating for me. And she may also do so when we meet with these clients to review and sign the applications. So all of her information is there in case you need it for the forms that you're filling out. And then same goes for myself. All of that information is there in part 9 if you need it. And then obviously the signature sections can be left blank. We'll do that on the day that we meet with the applicant to review and sign the forms. As I mentioned before, if someone has kind of an interesting case, or had traveled through a lot of countries before entering the United States, and you need more room, we can use Part 11, which is the additional information section. So in this example, you can see that John Smith and his family traveled through several countries before coming to the United States. So the important stuff to write down is the country, the dates the client was there to the best of their knowledge, if they don't know for a fact. And then it's really important just to be clear that no status was offered to the applicant in those countries. Even if you plan to not utilize this page, it's important to put the client's first and last name and their A number on it, just so that we can avoid any like request for evidence or any claim that the forms were incomplete. So that concludes the form I-821. And the next one is the form I-765, which is the application for employment authorization. So all of the information you'll need for that, same documents that you'd use for the I-821, passport, I-94, intake or screening sheets, social security card, and work authorization document if applicable. So this form is quite a bit shorter, but part one is just asking if this is an initial application for employment authorization or a renewal. I remember attending a meeting that USCIS was putting on that said, if you previously had work authorization through parole and you're applying for TPS for the first time, you can select 1A, initial permission to accept employment. But if the client comes in with a copy of their previous work authorization card that they had through parole, I think it might be safer to select box 1C, renewal, so that we can share that previous work authorization document, just so that USCIS has information and there isn't any confusion. So then part two is really similar to the same section on the I-821, just name, address, identifying information, things like that. Question 14 is asking if the applicant wants a social security card. A lot of times people will already have their social security card when they asked for it through parole. But if we're working with someone who doesn't have one yet, we would kind of answer this a bit differently and have to fill in like their father and mother's birth names. But in John Smith's example, he already has a social security card, and that's kind of the most common thing. So then some more information about entry into the United States and from where. And then an important part that I highlighted is question 27 on page 3. That's where we enter the eligibility category. For TPS, the category is A12. That'll just signify to USCIS to send out a work authorization document connected to TPS, so it'll last for the duration of the TPS designation. And then the rest of this can be blank because none of these questions apply if you're applying through the A12 category. And then part 3, just like on the I-821, we'll be filling in information about the applicant, the interpreter, and the attorney or accredited rep, so that there's contact information there, and then there's space for everybody to sign. And then there's an additional information page if you need it, but most of the time we don't for these work authorization applications. And the last form we'll look at is the I-912. That's the request for a fee waiver. We'll do this for clients who are providing a DHS letter. This is just a letter showing that they're receiving a means-tested benefit, like food stamps, SNAP, cash assistance, or some sort of Medicaid. The information we need off of that letter is the type of benefit, the date that the benefit was awarded, or if we don't have that, at least the date that the applicant requested that information and received it from DHS or the awarding agency. And then we can use that just to confirm for sure that the applicant is still receiving those benefits. And then whatever document has their alien number on it. And unlike the I-821 and 765, all the family members can be included on the same fee waiver, so they can all sign the same form. And then we can make copies of that same fee waiver to include in each of their individual applications. So on the fee waiver, section 1 is just asking some basic information again. Line 5 is important to fill out that the fee waiver is connected to the I-821 and I-765. Section 2 is where we can put information about dependents. So these would be other family members that are receiving benefits that are also applying for TPS and work authorization. So this is where I put in information about John Smith's wife and 2 children. And then section 3 is where you enter the basis for the fee waiver request. Most of the time we'll be filling it out based on a means tested benefit. So we only have to complete sections 4 and 7. So looking at section 4, this is where we can put in information about the type of benefit that's being awarded and from what agency, the name of each family member receiving the benefit. And then it's important to check yes, that they're receiving the benefit now. And then like I mentioned before, in terms of the date when a benefit was awarded, if we don't have the date that the benefits, the cycle starts, we can just put the date that's on the DHS letter. It might just be the date that that document was downloaded or the date that the client went into DHS to ask for the letter. And then section 6, we can leave blank. Section 7 is where the clients will sign. So you can, in the printed name section, just type out the names of each family member that will be signing the form. You may have noticed Jessica Smith is kind of young. She's under the age of 14. So any children in a family that are under 14, parents are able to sign on their behalf. So I just provided an example of what that would look like. So on line 17.3, maybe John Smith or Jane Smith, the parents will put their own signature, and then in the printed name section, you can just make a note that a parent signed on behalf of the child. And then there's more space if you need it. If it's a big family and they can't all fit on this form, we can print out an additional information form, so there's space for more signatures. So that's it. That should be, kind of a step-by-step guide on how to fill out these forms. The information that you enter might be a little different than what I showed, depending on by what means someone entered the United States. But if it's humanitarian parole versus U4U versus visitor visa or something like that, it might depend on whether they have benefits and are applying for a fee waiver. That could change, and it could also change, the number of countries they went through. But hopefully this gives a good idea of where to look for all of that information. If you do come across something funky or something that I didn't, allude to or talk about in this presentation, you are more than welcome to reach out to me to chat about it and chat about what to do. So there's my email address if you need it to ask any questions or just reach out. So that's it. Thank you very much for helping us out with filling out all these forms. I, for one, really appreciate it. So yeah, I hope to hear from you all. If not, thanks again for helping.